Thank you everyone for joining us today. I wanted to say hello, but I'm going to stop sharing my video here if I can figure out how to, because I need this light and I can tell it's a distraction and I'm a chair swiveler. Okay. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you to everyone for joining us today and being here. And I also want to take a moment to thank our families and colleagues who also helped make it possible for us to be here together. I have a couple of disclaimers. One, this is going to be a live demo, so fingers crossed. I am using a community demo server on 2105. If you were trying to access the Equinox demo server today, I will restore it after my presentation. Since I'm using a demo server, there was some functionality that I was not going to be able to cover today, but it gives us a little bit of a closer look at what a new install will be. For the examples I have set up, I did try to keep a variety of libraries in mind. So some of the examples might be applicable to you or maybe not, but that's why they're versatile. The functionality may require different permissions. Some of the interface you may need more permissions than what you might currently have. For example, you might need the permission to actually manage authorized values. And if I left any values or settings out, please forgive me. This is my first Koha presentation. I'm excited to be here and I'm also a little nervous. So authorized values are a way for us to create controlled vocabularies throughout the various interfaces within Koha. So I'm going to jump into the demo server now. The authorized values live under Koha administration. Authorized values. I'm not going to go over all of the authorized values today. I am trying to focus on patrons and items and a few carryovers along the way, but I do have them listed in the slides for you. We're going to start in a patron account and we're going to go into an existing patrons edit interface. This would be similar if we are registering a new patron. So the first authorized value we come across when we register a patron is street type. And street type corresponds to authorized value road type. So I've already created a couple of road types. There aren't any out of the box road types. If you do not use road types, if you don't want the street type drop down option to appear, then let's just go ahead and delete them. I don't think we'll need them. If we do, we'll build them again. Let me refresh your screen. I hope you don't mind me flipping through tabs and refreshing a little bit along the way. So since I've removed all the values out of the road type authorized value, now street type is no longer a drop-down option for us. Next, within the patron screen, we have sort 1 and sort 2. I've already created some values for sort 1. Sort 1 and sort 2 correspond to the authorized values of B sort 1 and B sort 2. If you do not add values into these authorized values, then it allows for free text. So sort 1 and sort 2 can be a way for you to add additional customized information about your patrons that you may need for statistical purposes. So you can leave it blank and use it free text, or you can create a drop down. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about searching sort 1 and sort 2. So I'm going to carry this over and we're going to open up the B sort 1 and take a look at secret, since I have my patron set up with a secret clearance. When you search for B sort, the sort 1 and sort 2 values, there is a known bug, and I have it listed in the slides. If we were to try to search for secret, which is the description and what appears in the patron's account, if we search for secret, that description, and select sort 1, we're not going to return in results. Koha currently is looking at the code within the authorized value, so we would need to know the code. So if I search for the code value and make sure that sort 1 is a search field, we'll retrieve our applicable patrons. Another thing I would like to point out about that interface is if we do search for our sort one, but we do not select our sort one or sort two value from the search field, we will also not return our expected results. But sort one and sort two are an easy way for you to compile additional statistical information about your patrons. Let's go on down a little bit here. I do have the housebound enabled. I know that there was an awesome housebound presentation earlier. I'm not going to go too far into housebound. I'm just going to show you the applicable authorized value. But if we come down to this last part, I have some additional attributes and identifiers already set up for us, and then we're going to step through an example. So the first additional attribute that I have, we can create more specific attributes and make them as simple or complex as we need to via our patron attribute type interface. We do need to make sure that system preference extend patron attributes is enabled. So we'll go there first under from home. We'll go to koha administration. I love this global system preference search. It's one of my favorite features about koha. So we'll search for extended patron attributes. I do not believe it's enabled by default. So if you're setting up a new install, I think don't enable is the default. So ours is already enabled, so we're good to go there to be able to search and edit and view our patron attributes. The patron attributes themselves, let's go back to the home page. The patron attributes themselves can be built under koha administration, patron attribute types. And so we can see here the patron attribute types that we've set up that are appearing in our patrons account. So the first one that we have is favorite author. And this particular patron attribute is allowing for free text. And that is because when we built the favorite author, if we go into edit here, I do not have an authorized value category linked to this particular patron attribute type, so it's going to allow for us to have free text. Next, yes?
We had a question in the chat about the benefit of the sort fields over authorized value or patron attribute fields.
I'm not sure that there's a value of one over the, and I'm sorry, I can't actually see the chat, so I apologize. Thank you for.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for.
I don't think that there's a benefit of one over the other necessarily. I think it depends on what your needs are, and maybe depending on how maybe you import your patron files, for example, may have a bearing on that. I'm not sure. This and it may also be that sort one and sort two were an earlier way to discover this information before attributes. Again, I'm not sure on that, but I wouldn't suggest that maybe one is better than the other. The additional attributes does allow for you to create these nested groupings that we're going to cover, and it does also allow you to specify what that actual field is. I would think that that would probably be an advantage over the sort, but as long as you internally know what the sort values should be, I want to advocate one over the other versus what your needs are.
Thank you.
Next, I've created a membership level, and the membership levels are, I built it. When I created it, well, let's go first into the patron attributes. Let's move that over here. So when we look at our membership levels, I did make it searchable, which we'll take a look at here in a second. And then I said display it in the patrons. But the key here is the reason why we have a drop down is I associated it with a corresponding authorized value. So I also needed to create the authorized value to go with it. So if we take a look at our authorized values and look at membership level, you'll see the different categories that I built. Now, you'll notice that I did make the code the same as the description. I know there's different opinions about how code should be formatted. I did this for the purposes of being able to go back and look at the search feature again, because again, koha is looking at the code and not the description. So if you have circulation staff who are looking for a listing of their individuals, for example, it may be more helpful if they don't know what the code is to mirror the code in the description, or in some way communicate what should be searched for the field. So again, if we grab the code and search based on the code, and for patron attributes, we don't have any additional select fields to choose from. We'll just enter the code and search, and it will retrieve our patrons. And I want to appreciate the humor of whomever came in last night and put Dean Winchester in here. That made me laugh this morning when I was prepping. That was good. Check out that email. And I'm glad that whoever was demoing took advantage of the patron attribute that was already set up. That was awesome. I got such a laugh out of that. Okay. So again, it does depend on what your needs are in terms of how you create your codes and descriptions, as long as everybody knows that if they do want to be able to search these different categories, they need to be searching for the code. Next, we have show barcode on the summary screen items listings. This is probably going to be part of your install. I'm not aware of anyone who removes it. I don't know if there are any warnings of removing this attribute. If we come into our patron attributes, this show barcode comes pretty standard with an install. Again, I don't know what the pros and cons are if you were to delete that, but what it does is by default, if you leave this value blank, or if you leave it blank, you're basically saying yes. So what it does is we're going to go into this patron's account. I've already logged her in, and with that show barcode set or not set, excuse me, either set to yes or left blank, it keeps the barcode column exposed to your patron when they're looking at their items checked out in the OPAC. If we come in and set it to no and save, and we'll refresh her account, you can see that barcode went away. So that's what that particular attribute does. Again, I don't know whether or not it would be a good idea to remove it since it's part of a standard install. But if anybody participating knows or has removed it without any interference with their database, that would be good to know. Now I've just put it back. And then finally, I've built a little bit more of a complex grouping here using PA class. And so let's take a look at that. You have a patron attribute, you have an authorized value called PA class. And PA class allows for you to group similar categories together. So for this example, I have degree program area, degree program level, and degree program name. And that way we can nest these together. Again, whether or not you want to nest them together or just lay them out flat, that depends on what your ultimate goals are with what you're trying to capture and how you want it represented and displayed. So we're going to go through an example here, but I wanted to mention real quick, since we're taking a look at this, I feel like I need to explain it. I tried to be careful with the degree program area versus department because I didn't want to be potentially confusing. Department is one of the out-of-the-box authorized values that you would need to set up if you plan on using course reserves. So I didn't want to confuse the program area with a department, because department means something else in your authorized values. So let's go ahead and set up a few authorized, patron attribute types. We're first going to make a rather simple one here. And when I was stepping through my examples, it was taking me forever to type and I was nervous and I kept mistyping. So I actually have another sheet over here that I'm just going to copy and paste from with, so I'm not going to be showing you all the typing there. I wasn't going to go too deep take a deep dive into creating patron attribute types themselves, but you can, when you're setting up your patron attribute types, you can make them like repeatable, display in the OPAC, make them searchable, you can make it mandatory, but we're going to focus on the areas that are particular to the authorized values. And so for the acceptable use policy, this would be a way for us. This is a very basic yes, no patron attribute. Have they signed the acceptable use or have they not? So in this case, when we create this patron attribute under the authorized value categories, there is already a default yes, no authorized value set up that we can use at our discretion. So we don't need to build another one. So we're going to go ahead and save that one. And now we're going to build a little bit more of a complex one using our PA class. And so when we set up the grouped categories, it might be helpful to go in a certain step so you don't have to do a lot of back and forth. So in my example, I'm first going to set up the PA class, then I'm going to set up the 2 authorized values, and then we're going to link it to our patron attributes. And so in this scenario, we're going to make a patron attribute grouping, and I'm actually drawing from a real scenario where there are multiple municipalities that cross-section with counties that share resources. So the library wants a way to represent its municipalities and its surrounding counties. If you're from Pennsylvania, I think you know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to first go into PA class. We already have that degree program that was set up earlier, so we're going to create a new PA class. And we're going to name it municipality. You don't need to set a description for OPAC unless you intend for that description to be different than what the main description is. You can set it to specific library limitations. And then I've never seen the icons interact with the authorized values in this way. I would love to know how people are using the icons, but I haven't actually seen them, with the exception of collection codes and LOC. I haven't seen it in use for the other authorized values. And we're going to save. Okay, so we have our PA class set up. Next, we're going to create a new category. It might be better if I just go out and create a new category out in our main authorized values, but that would have been the same function. So we're going to click new category. And so now we've created a new authorized value. And from here, we add additional authorized values to our Blair County authorized value that we just created. And we're going to create another one. This can be a little bit tricky to make sure we click on new authorized value for Blair versus click in new category. It can be a little tricky to do that. And I'm going to throw one more in there. Ooh. Okay, so we have this particular authorized value created. Now we're going to create our non-Blair category. So we're going to click New Category. And add some authorized values to it. I'm going to take one out of the examples here. I did have 3 set up for 3, but I'm looking at the time, so. Okay, so we've built our PA class. We've built the 2 authorized values that we need. Now we need to build the new patron attribute types. So we'll come back into our patron attribute types and select New. You could make this repeatable. I'm not sure somebody would live in multiple municipalities, but perhaps. We'll display, but what we need to do here is under the authorized value, we need to associate with that authorized value we created of Blair County. And then we also, since we want to nest it together under class, we're going to select municipality and save. So that has created a new grouping. Now we create the other non. Save. And so now when we come back into this patron's account, we have a new grouping that we can choose from for our patron statistics. Are there any questions over this part of this interface? We're going to move on. And I can't see chat.
There was a question from Circulation Test. I missed exactly when they asked it, but they said, what would that look like for course reserves?
Of department, was it referring to department for course reserves?
I think so.
So it would depend on, let's take a look at that real quick. I don't have any departments set up. It depends on if you're starting out fresh with your course reserves, if you're migrating your course reserves, but your departments would need to be reflective of the departments that you intend to set up for when you interact with the course reserve module itself.
Okay, thank you.
There's different ways to set that up, but ultimately would be how you, when you're managing course reserves, how you intend to interact with it. But it would be part of the requirement to set up your course reserves. I have that in the slides. Let's take a look real quick. You have to have both the department and the terms established. Okay, let's close that out. Next, we're going to take a look at real quick Homebound. So let's just go back to the patron's main details here. So if you have Homebound enabled, Housebound enabled, over on the left-hand side, we'll access it through Housebound tab. The frequency drop-down options correspond to the housebound frequency authorized value. So you can make these more detailed in frequency. And while we're here, we also have add message. When you select add message, you have an option for predefined notes. These predefined notes can be configured under borrower notes. So if we wanted to create a new borrower note, the description that you give the authorized value is what will display in the pre-selected note, and there is a 200 character limit. I'm not sure if I need to refresh. Let's just refresh. So now when we add a note, we can see that borrower note we just created in the authorized value. Next, we have payment types. So within the patron's account over on the left-hand side, accounting, when we go to make a payment on the patron's account, the payment types that display correspond to authorized value payment type. Let's see, payment type. If you have point of sale enabled, that same payment type would display in your point of sale interface. Next, within the patron's holds. So right now, if we mark the hold as canceled, we would just mark that we would just see the cancel marked holds. However, if we come into authorized value hold cancellation and create a reason, and there may be, depending on your install, you may have a couple of out of the box reasons. I'm not sure. This demo does not. And so without the hold cancellation authorized values in place, this is the option that you'll see on your patron's account. So if we come in and add a new authorized value, now when we take a look at the patron's hold, we have a cancellation reason that we can give. Now we're going to move out of the patron's account and we're going to go into the patron's OPAC account and take a quick look at the purchase suggestions. Within the purchase suggestions, if you have that enabled to your patrons, when the patron creates a new purchase suggestion, and if you have these fields exposed, because you can remove some of these fields, item type is configurable. These are the out-of-the-box item types. They're configurable under suggest format. So some libraries prefer to keep this item type general for the patrons. Some libraries may prefer to have those item types mirror what their item types are in their collection. But either way, you can configure your item types that patrons see in the purchase suggestions based on suggest format. And then next on the patron's purchase request, there is a reason for the suggestion. These are also out of the box reasons. The reasons for suggestions are under authorized value, OPAC suggestion. So you can customize the reasons for the purchase suggestion. Within the staff client, We can either go under acquisitions, or we can just go more suggestions. And that takes us to managing the suggestions. There's a couple of more. So again, we have the item types that are configurable by the suggest format, but then we also have mark selected as and choose a status and choose a reason. So choose a status can be built under suggest status, and the suggest a reason can be configured under suggest. So we're going to take kind of move away from the patrons and go in more into the items. So let's see. I'm going to leave her account up just in case. Let's move this. Let's first take a look at item types. There's just a couple in the item types that I do want to go over, though. Under koha administration, item types. If we create a new item type, there is the ability to create a search category, and that corresponds, and it labels it here, it corresponds to the authorized value item type cat. The search category groups similar item types together within your search results. And so, and then I just want to also mention while we're here, there's a SIP media type. The SIP media type corresponds to, you probably guessed it, SIP media type. So you can configure those as well if you have lockers, things of that nature. But let's take a closer look at how to add an item type cat to our item types. So I'm going to cancel out of here. And in this example, we have some item types that all represent reserves. And so this is also kind of going back to that discussion of course reserves. If right now in the advanced search, I have item types displayed. You can take those out, but I have mine displayed, and right now we have the reserves displaying, and that may not mean much to our patrons. Maybe we have them set like this to make more sense to us policy wise. So what we can do is under our authorized value of item type cat, we can create a new authorized value. We can call it course reserves. Now we can go back into our item types and let's edit the 24-hour. And we can assign that course reserve to that item type cat. And let's also grab the 3-day. Now let's refresh. So since we grouped those two reserve types together under course reserves, it moved those two item types under course reserves, and that might be more meaningful for patrons to search under. And we left 4-hour reserve out so you can see the difference. It moved the 24 and the 3-day under course reserves. So if we were to go ahead and add the 4-hour to that same grouping, that puts them all together. So that's a nice feature to use if you have grouped materials or maybe a naming convention that doesn't quite make sense to your end users. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at an item record. Are there any questions?
There are not any questions in the YouTube chat at this point.
Thank you. So now we're going to take a look at an item record. I have one pulled up for us already. So there are a few, and let me take a step back here. When Koha doesn't have a designated item status interface. Instead, it breaks the item statuses out by different authorized value categories. This breakout does also offer more flexibility and versatility in how you choose to use your statuses. So the first ones we're going to take a look at here are withdrawn, damaged, use restrictions, and not loan. Those are all their own separate authorized values. And let me pull my chart up here. So I don't have restricted listed on here, and lost is also another damaged, lost is also another status, but it's not on the item record itself. It's more important in terms of the system preferences. But I do have this basic chart here that shows so you have damaged, lost, withdrawn, not loan, and then the other one is, let's take a look, it's restricted, that you can set up. Restricted. So for any of these statuses that you create, let's see if we have any set up already on here. So for any of the statuses that you edit or build, your code needs to be a numeric value. And then I have over here in the notes, for example, the not loan reasons. If you set up a new not loan reason and you designate it with a negative number, that still makes the material holdable. So let's take a look at those. Let's actually look at lost. It has more values in it. We're going to look at lost again here in a minute, though, hopefully. So here you can see for all of the different lost authorized values, their code is numeric. If you tried to create a new lost authorized value and gave it a text code, it would not work as you expect.
Erica, there's a question in chat from Christopher Brannon. Can you add icons to the course reserves group?
Yes, that's actually a good question. Let's go back to, actually is another way you can use the icons in the authorized values from earlier. So if we go back and take a look at our item type cat, I didn't give it an icon, but this is an example. Thank you for asking that question. This is an example where you can set an icon. Let's refresh that. And so the icon here will be based on the icon that you've set in your item type cat. Thank you again for asking that question. Let's see. Okay, let's go back to the item, the patrons, the item record here. So we have withdrawn, damaged, use restrictions, not for loan. And then next we have collection code. The collection code, I've already configured a few. The collection code corresponds. This is a pretty important authorized value. The collection code corresponds to the C code. And so I think you have a couple out of the box like fiction and reference, but I've created a few more here that represent what libraries would more typically use for a collection. The collection code, it allows for you to create customized values and groupings of your items. So for example, the architecture collection or your digital journalism collection or your rare books collection, where everything might not be in the same physical space together, but they all represent that larger collection in your larger collection in your library. So the collection codes are very important. You can make the collection code searchable. I do not currently have it set to searchable. So if we wanted to search our collection code, we'd come under Home, Koha Administration, and we'd set our advanced search types. And so I believe out of the box is just the item types. Again, you don't have to display your item types, so you can remove that, but we're going to keep it. We're going to go ahead and add our C code. And while we're here, you can also add your shelving locations, which is the next value on the item record. And and it corresponds to the authorized value of LOC. So we'll just add it while we're here. So configuring your collection codes can be a great way for you to let patrons explore materials by collections. It's a great way to represent if you have large donations and you want to make that a prominent search aspect. Let's see. Oh, let's go back to item. And then next we have, again, shelving location. That corresponds to authorized value LOC. And then if you need to set up a specific shelving schema, the shelving and the control number, where is it at on here? I've lost them. Shelving and control number, that corresponds to authorized value stack. And I have a little link in the presentation that goes in a little bit, that takes you over to OCLC about the shelving control number. I wanted to also quickly mention how important the authorized values are to your MARC framework. So let's open a new tab here. Once you have your MARC frameworks, you generally don't interact with them very often. But if you're working on a new install or something like that, and perhaps you come in on your item record and you go, wait a minute, I don't have any drop downs on any of my item record information. A place you might want to look is under administration, MARC bib framework, bibliographic framework. We're going to just take a quick look at the default framework. Take a look at our structure. I'm going to select our 952. And view our subfields. And so we can see our different subfields are interacting with that item record. So if we were to come in and edit subfield 0, which represents the withdrawn, we can see that our authorized on the configuration, it's associated, this particular subfield is associated with authorized value withdrawn. And that is what is allowing us to interact with the withdrawn status drop-down menu in our item records. So the authorized values are heavily important with our bib frames. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the system preferences. I mentioned earlier that lost is a very important authorized value. It's not on the item record, but it does come into play with our system preferences. And so let's take a look at a couple here. Oop. So when we set up our system preferences for a default long overdue charge value, default long overdue lost value at so many days, Koha is looking for the numeric value of your lost authorized value. So for example, if you by default set the lost value of an item to blank when it's more than 60 days. So we need to go in and look at our authorized values for lost and determine what value we want it to go. Well, in 60 days, we want it to go to lost. So when we're configuring that system preference, we need to enter the value of 1 in the system preference. And that's telling Koha in 60 days, mark that item as lost. And then I was going to try to go through a full example of claims return, but I'm having some limitations on the demo. But we'll do what we can. So let's go back to our patron's account. Our patron has an item out. And so we have a pretty basic screen here of being able to renew and check in. However, if we come into our system preferences and set a claim return loss value, it's going to open up claim return reasons. Now, looking back at our loss values, perhaps none of these quite fit what claims return would be for us. And maybe we don't want to name it claims return because the patron may see that. So we can create a new authorized value and name it whatever we want. We do need to make sure, since this is a status, we need to make sure the authorized value is numeric. So we're just going to continue on from the others and we'll call it 5. And then the description will say need to locate. And so now we have a new authorized value for within the lost authorized value category that may more accurately reflect how we want claims returns to display. And so now we could come in at our system preference and give it a value of 5. And so now when we look at this patron's account, since we gave this system preference a value, we now have a claim return option. And this is where I'm getting kind of limited. It's not actually finishing out the workflow. But under claims, you can create claim resolution reasons. And those resolution reasons are another authorized value of, I think it might be on the last page, return claim resolution. So you can create further claim resolution reasons in there. And then I have as many of the system preferences as I caught. I know you can do more with, you know, your CSS, Java, things like that, as far as what you might want to display or hide. I have all the additional authorized values listed out here. And then I should have pulled this out. We have time for me to show this to you. So this one is a pretty good one. I don't know if anybody out there with us is using it. I would love to know how it's functioning for you, for your library, but we cannot create, not to go too far into policies, but when we create policies in Koha, we build them based on the patron categories and or the item types. We don't build them based on shelving locations or collection codes like we might be able to do in other ILSs, especially the shelving location. But there is this system preference of items denied renewal that you can control with your C code. So if an item lives in a particular C code, that is one way for you to be able to specify that there's no renewals. So there's some things like that in there that are kind of hidden. And then I guess the only other thing that I'll try to mention without having the system preference pulled out and ready to go is if you are looking to display your shelving locations and things of that nature to your patrons or just through different interfaces, I want to remind you to make sure you check under Koha administration, table settings, and then let's take a look at OPAC. I think I already took it out. I think by default shelving location is hidden by default. I think I remember taking that off. But so you'll want to check your tables and make sure you don't have anything hidden by default and configure those the way you want as well. That's all I have. I want to say thank you again. Thank you for everybody's questions. And are there any more questions or anything else you want to take a look at? I'm jealous of those of you that get to hang out with each other in person. That's awesome. I'm happy for you.
I'm not seeing any other questions yet, but we do have a few seconds of delay. I use the authorized values a lot, and I learned some stuff.
Yay, thank you.
No, I always like learning more about authorized values. We use a lot of them. We've actually got a lot of them set up in our consortium for the different statuses for purchase suggestions, and then I've used some jQuery, so we only see, like, our library has Latah County specific ones, and so then we'll hide those from non-Latah County staff members. So like they only see theirs and we only see ours. But we can use a lot of them.
That's a good point to bring up, Lisette. Let me point that out. So when you're creating your patron categories, excuse me, your patron attribute types, you can limit them to the patron categories that you want to use them on. That's a good thing to bring up.
And you can also limit them by library, although some of the things
Yes.
like the patron, the suggestion, different types of suggestion, or, where it is in the process. Like we use ones for sent to the adult services manager and stuff like that. Those ones don't follow the library limitation.
Interesting.
So we had to use jQuery to do it, but we already have jQuery set up for like branch specific things or district specific things. So it wasn't like that much to add it.